Obligation to do wrong. While everyone is aware that there are laws against robbery and murder, except when they're committed in the name of authority, the average person is completely unaware of the tens of thousands of pages of other government issued statutes, rules, and regulations, federal, state, and local. But even when they have very little idea of what the law does and does not allow, most people still hold a general belief that obeying the law is a good thing and that breaking the law is a bad thing. In fact, even when a person is strongly opposed to a particular law, believing it to be unjust, he may still hold a general conflicting belief that the laws ought to be obeyed and that is justified to punish those who disobey. The psychological paradox is quite common. In fact, with many people vehemently lobbying to change what they view to be bad laws while supporting the idea that as long as it's law, people should obey it. Such mental contradictions are common in the context of the belief in authority, but are rare outside of it. For example, no one would argue that it is morally wrong to try and steal an old lady's purse, but also morally wrong for the old lady to hang on to her purse. But the concept of a bad law in the mind of the one who believes in authority boils down to a similar paradox. A bad command which also is bad to disobey. The spectator who believes in authority may view a particular command enacted by the masters and implemented by the enforcers as being unimportant, unnecessary, counterproductive, or even stupid or unjust, while at the same time believing that people still have a moral obligation to obey that command simply because it is the law. Examples of the effects of such a viewpoint abound, ranging from the mundane to the horrific. Here are a few. At 2 a.m., on a wide open, straight, empty road running through unpopulated farmland, a driver slows down but does not stop at the stop sign at a cross street. A motorcycle cop, hiding 100 yards behind some bushes, turns his lights on. Almost everyone given those facts would agree that the driver did not harm or endanger anyone or anyone's property, and yet most people would agree that the cop would have the right to demand payment from that driver via a traffic ticket. In other words, even though they would concede that the only thing bad about what the driver did was that it was technically illegal, they believe that that alone justifies the forcible robbery of the driver. Taking it one step further, if the driver attempted to leave the scene rather than accept the ticket, most speculators would agree that the cop would be right to chase down, capture, and imprison the driver. Example number two. A government inspector from a state board of health conducts an inspection of a restaurant. The restaurant is perfectly clean and organized, and the inspector finds no indication that anything there possesses a risk to anyone's health. However, he nonetheless finds several technical violations of the local code for restaurants. As a result of these violations, not because they create a danger to anyone, but because they are against the rules, the owner is fined hundreds of dollars. Again, even though the restaurant owner did not harm or endanger anyone or anyone's property, most people would view it as legitimate for the owner to be robbed by those acting on behalf of government. And if the owner attempted to resist such robbery, whether by trying to conceal the technical violations or bribe the inspector, or by refusing to pay the fine, he would be seen as immoral by most people, and the enforcers would be seen as having the right to use whatever means necessary to achieve compliance with the law. Example number three. A man drives his friend home from a party. Knowing he would have to drive, he did not have any alcohol to drink, though his friend did. He drops his friend off and heads home. He notices the police doing a sobriety checkpoint traffic stop ahead and remembers that his friend left his half-full beer bottle in the car. Knowing that it is illegal to have an open container of alcohol in the car, he covers it up. He has not harmed or endangered anyone, and in fact has acted quite responsibly, acting as designated driver to make sure his friend would have arrived home safely. However, he still broke the law, albeit accidentally, by driving a car with an open bottle of beer in it and then tried to hide evidence of the fact. If he is caught doing so and arrested, few people would view the cop as the bad guy in the situation. Example number 4. A man sells a shotgun with a barrel a quarter of an inch shorter than the law allows. The weapon is no more lethal than a shotgun of a quarter inch longer, and no one who was involved threatened or used violence against anyone. But the man, having been caught with the illegal item, is subject to a paramilitary invasion of his property, followed by an armed standoff in which several people are killed. Unfortunately, this example is not hypothetical. It happened to Randy Weaver at the incident at Ruby Ridge in 1992. He was not merely caught selling an illegal shotgun, he was enticed into doing so by undercover law enforcers. The rest of the armed invasion of the Weaver's property and the subsequent shootout and prolonged siege was that Mr. Weaver's wife and son were killed, and he and a friend were wounded. Though it would be absurd to claim that there's a moral difference between possessing a shotgun with an 18-inch barrel and possessing a gun with a 17 and 3/4-inch barrel, and even though the allegation was the entire legal justification for the armed assault and confrontation, many spectators would still fault Randy Weaver, viewing him as the bad guy for having allowed himself to be coaxed into breaking an arbitrary, completely irrational, not to mention unconstitutional, law. That is the power of the belief in authority. It can lead many people to view a gang of sadistic, murderous thugs as the good guys and view their victims as the bad guys. To most people, breaking the law without specifying which law has an automatic negative connotation. They view disobedience to authority not merely as dangerous, but as immoral. But to the government believer, something even worse than committing a minor victimless crime is openly disobeying an agent of authority. The average spectator, when observing the interaction between an authority figure and anyone else, will often view with disdain anyone who does not immediately, unquestioningly answer any questions and comply with any requests from the man with a badge. Even if the person complies but exhibits an attitude toward the authority figure, any attitude other than meek subservience, many spectators will be quick to condemn the one who fails to grovel. And the one who runs away from the police, even if he had done nothing wrong in the first place, is viewed with scorn by most. And when someone who runs or hides or refuses to cooperate is beaten up, tortured, or even murdered by law enforcers, many spectators opine that the victim should have done what the police told him to do. And when someone actively resists an authority figure, few have the gumption to take that person's side under any circumstances, even with mere words. Just as a well-trained dog will not bite his master, even when sadistically maltreated, so to those who have been trained to bow to authority are usually psychologically incapable of bringing themselves to lift a finger to defend themselves, much less someone else, from any aggression committed in the name of law and government and authority. Indeed, due to their authoritarian indoctrination, most people would more eagerly condemn their fellow victims than join together with their fellow victims to actively resist tyranny. There is, of course, a difference between saying that it is not smart for someone to do something and saying that it is immoral to do something. It is one thing to say that it is stupid for someone to mouth off to a cop, and another thing to say that doing so is actually immoral, and that one who does so therefore deserves whatever abuse or punishment he receives. The believers in authority often express the latter opinion about anyone who defies the police, regardless of the reason. The idea of average people imposing justice upon wayward law enforcers existentially terrifies statists, even when the law enforcer has done something as serious as committing murder. In the eyes of the well indoctrinated, the only civilized course of action in such a situation is to beg some other authority to make things right, but never to take the law into one's own hands. People may complain about and condemn legal injustice, but few are even able to consider the possibility of engaging in premeditated illegal resistance when the agents of government are inflicting vicious brutality upon unarmed nonviolent targets. And if through prolonged brainwashing, a people can be rendered psychologically unable to resist the oppressions done in the name of authority, then it makes no difference whether the people have the physical means to resist. Modern tyrants and their enforcers are always outnumbered, and often outgunned, by their victims by a factor of hundreds or thousands, yet tyrants still maintain power, not because people lack the physical ability to resist, but because as a result of their deeply inculcated belief in authority, they lack the mental ability to resist. As Stephen Biko put it, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed.